Hey everybody, welcome to week 8 here. Today we're going to look at performance tasks, or um, otherwise known as authentic performance assessments, task scenarios, performance-based assessments. This type of assessment has various names, but we're going to look at the characteristics of what we want you to create in your signature assignment. Okay, so our objective for today is simple. Today I will explore authentic performance-based assessments and design and evaluate authentic performance-based assessments. All right. The reason for this is so that you can create one for your signature assignment. And here's how you know if you got it. If you can produce this draft of your signature assignment using the planning guide that I've posted in Google Classroom for week 8. Okay, so we'll go from there. First, a couple of quick announcements. The authentic performance task originally was due week 9. I moved it over to week 10 to accommodate us cleaning things up. So good news, you have more time to develop your ideas. Bad news, we have less time to clean it up by the end. But we'll make it work. All right. The data assignment is still due next week, but we will do the bulk of it in class. The reason for that is you actually need the formal assessment to be able to complete it, and that's the assignment that's due the day that this is being posted on week 7, right? So make sure you have that finished so that we can use it for the data assignment. Okay. All right. So what is a performance task? There's a few sources that I'd like you to take a look at, and if you haven't read these yet, do that first. So the one that's really important is Jay McTeague's "What is a Performance Task?" Part 1. Chapter 10 of our text is all about performance assessments. And then these next 2 links will give you examples of what they look like. So if at this point you have not yet read McTeague's "What is a Performance Task?" hit the stop button, go read that, and then come back. Welcome back. All right. So if at this point, I'm assuming you've read McTeague's essay. And here's his opening statement here. A performance task essentially is a test or an assessment that asks students to demonstrate their knowledge, to demonstrate their understanding and the proficiency of it by either performing something or producing something that is tangible. And unlike a formal assessment, which was due this week, right? You ask students to apply their knowledge in a context, typically a real life-ish context. The more authentic, the more real life it is, the more likely you get the most accurate data, and the more likely it is for it to stick in your student's brain, right? So we're going to flesh this out just a little bit, just to reinforce what you've already read from McTeague's essay and chapter 10 of our text. All right. This is a graphic that NGSS, the Next Generation Science Standards, has published. And it sort of shows what's at the heart of performance assessments. It takes multiple content areas like math, science, and English and coalesces them. So that center area, the gray area, is this magic point where you're assessing, or students are applying their math skills, their science skills, their ELA skills to produce something. So you don't necessarily have to identify all these things in this, but I wanted to show you that this is a trend in which standards are moving, where they don't exist in silos anymore. They're trying to be more cohesive and create more overlap, because in the real world, that's what that's how knowledge is applied. right? So, speaking of, what we want is that centerpiece, right? An authentic task that is also a performance task, right? But it also is going to be an assessment. So let's break this apart. So traditional assessments assess knowledge and skills, but are not usually authentic. So your formal assessment should give you data, right? Based on this, my students know these things and they don't know these things, so I need to reteach these things, right? So you need students to be able to know certain skills to be able to apply them later. And that's what traditional assessments like tests and quizzes um, provide. A performance task involves application, so it takes it even further. So you take that knowledge that you've assessed that students, whether students know or not, and they apply it to produce or perform something. All right. This is inherent in art and PE classes, in a lot of career and technical education classes, but it is probably more um, valuable in any context, right? Yet we often ignore this type of assessment, right? But we can take it even further and not only have a performance task, but have a performance task be set in an authentic context. So make it very real. So let me give you a few characteristics of what create this, right? Before we do that, often the 21st century skills are mentioned in relation to performance tasks. Sometimes we confuse that and think, oh, I have to use technology. You don't necessarily. When we talk about 21st century skills, we're talking about collaboration, communication, creativity, and critical thinking. Those things can involve technology, but don't necessarily have to. All right, so here are the essential characteristics of performance tasks. First, they have to be application oriented. So students take the knowledge that they have acquired and do something with that knowledge, create something, or perform something, which is characteristic two. They perform or create something, which means that it's open-ended. There's no one right answer. It's non-Googleable, right? So they have to use their knowledge, create something, and because it's creative or students are making something authentic, no one else has that same thing, which is great. Also, they are real life-ish and new-ish, right? So the more authentic the performance assessment is, the better it can be, right? And I'll give you a few examples coming up here. Specifically, number 4 here, or this example after number 4. You have to show, or students have to show, that they can take knowledge and transfer it. So in this specific example of a performance task, the math teacher has given the students the option to select how their quarterly grade will be calculated, right? So they have to determine whether they'll use the mean, median, or mode to give them a grade and be able to explain why they chose that. So they have to know what those 3 terms mean, know how to calculate them, look at their test scores and everything, and do the math to figure out which one of those they would rather get. It's authentic, right? Because it's real life. Now, I don't know if you would be allowed to do this in real life, but it's an interesting assignment. I think students might get, into an assignment where they can has a real life impact on them. So here's a few more examples in different content areas. So this is a social studies example. So do some research on drones, the possible commercial uses, different opinions on the issue, environmental repercussions of it, things like that. And then students develop or create a position on that in the form of a policy brief, an editorial, a blog, so some sort of commercial or a pamphlet. You can decide. And so they take their research and apply it to create an opinion, right, through a tangible thing or something they're performing. Here is an example in an English class. So what makes something funny? So students can read different types of humor or humorists. I would even maybe add some sort of a contemporary humorist, a satirist or something like that, and sort of compare what makes it funny, and maybe even create a funny piece, a piece of satire. But the idea is they have to understand what satire is, what wit is, language conventions, literary devices that produce that, and then either create one or in this case, be able to write a review that for a piece of comedy, right? So they're making a judgment, evaluating. That's the second highest level in Bloom's taxonomy. Right? Now, this is a PE example, so you can hit pause and read the entire thing, but the gist is students take the principles and rules from one sport, and this is soccer, and apply those to a new sport that they design. So the sport can be whatever, but they have to use two rules or two principles from soccer into that sport. All right. Here's a very interesting science example. So in this case, again, you can pause it, but what the students ultimately create is a pamphlet about a genetic disease. But the situation that this teacher created is a very fascinating one, where the student is a genetic counselor, and they encounter a couple who find out that both of their great grandmas were at one time married to the same man who had a genetic disease. So they have to figure out the likelihood that their kid is going to have that genetic disease. But then they get to choose what the students get to choose what that genetic disease is, and then figure out the probability that their child will have one based on pedigree charts and all these other things. So again, real life situation with kind of a fascinating backstory, and then it's created by students, right? So quick lecture today on purpose, because I know you have a lot of things to do, and there's a lot of work that needs to go into all the unit plans and everything. So part of the work is the planning, and so I want to give you today, this week here, to start planning this. So you have all until next week, through week 9. So come ready with this on week 9. Okay. So we can kind of go through this and plan things out a little more. Okay. So I think the due date I gave you for this document itself is right before class on next week. All right. So this is nothing giant. If you look at the directions, it tells you to write down in 1 or 2 sentences a description of each of these things. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be planning your signature assignment, or showing me the blueprint for your signature assignment. This is not a commitment. You're not officially married to this. You can change your mind, but I want to see if you're going in the right direction here. So each of the boxes, basically, you're going to fill out the white box. Okay. So that's the assignment here, is fill in the white box. All right, with 1 to 2 sentences. If you can get this done during class time, today on Wednesday, if you're watching this on Wednesday, then great. If not, the earlier you get it done, the more likely I can give you some feedback on this. Okay, and it's the majority of what you're going to be doing this week for this class is planning. All right. So in that process, you all know how to get a hold of me. So please do if you have any questions. All right. I'm happy to get in touch with you guys however you need. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you on October 14th.